I always thought family meant unconditional love and support, but growing up in the shadow of my brother Mark taught me otherwise. For as long as I can remember, my parents' attention was like sunshine that never quite reached me. They attended every one of Mark's baseball games, science fairs, and school performances, front row, cameras ready. For my events, they were too busy or stuck in traffic. "We'll make it to the next one, honey," my mom would say, but the next one came and went with the same empty promises. I learned to celebrate my achievements alone. When I got accepted into a prestigious business program, my father barely looked up from his newspaper. "That's nice," he mumbled, while my mother was busy planning Mark's graduation party, even though my brother was barely passing his classes. He got a car for making it through high school. I got a card with $20 in it for getting a full scholarship to college. Despite everything, I persisted. I worked 3 jobs to support myself through school when my parents decided that Mark's law school tuition was more important than helping me with my living expenses. "He's going to be a lawyer," my father said, as if my business degree meant nothing. "You'll be fine. You've always been independent." Independent wasn't a compliment. It was their way of justifying their neglect. After graduation, I declined their invitation to move back home. Instead, I took a risk and joined a struggling tech startup, working 16-hour days, sleeping on a futon in a tiny studio apartment. Those were the hardest years of my life, but I learned more than any business school could teach me. When the company started gaining traction, I rose through the ranks quickly. My innovative marketing strategies caught the attention of investors, and within 3 years, I was heading the marketing department. I rarely called home during this time. What was the point? The conversations were always the same. 5 minutes about my life, then 30 minutes about Mark's latest accomplishment or crisis. At 28, I met Jason. Unlike my family, he saw me, really saw me. He listened when I spoke, remembered the details of my stories, and celebrated my wins as if they were his own. When I told him about my childhood, he held me as I finally allowed myself to cry over the years of feeling invisible. "You deserve to be seen," he whispered against my hair. "You always have." The startup went public, and my stock options suddenly made me wealthy beyond my wildest dreams. The same week, Jason proposed during a sunset sail on the bay. It was perfect, intimate, thoughtful, and completely us. As we sailed back to the marina, surrounded by the golden light of dusk, I felt a completeness I'd never known before. "We should call your parents," Jason suggested that evening as we celebrated with champagne. I hesitated, my glass halfway to my lips. "They're probably busy with something important," I said, unable to keep the bitterness from my voice. "This is important too," he insisted gently. "At least give them a chance." So I called. My mother answered, distracted as always. I took a deep breath and shared our news. "That's wonderful, dear," she said, her voice flat. I could hear the TV in the background. "We're so happy for you. Listen, can I call you back? Your father and I are in the middle of something." That something was a rerun of a crime show they'd seen 3 times before. I later found out from my aunt. When I hung up, Jason saw my expression and didn't ask. He just held me. "We'll send them a proper invitation," he said. "Maybe seeing it in writing will make it feel more real to them." I nodded, not wanting to spoil our night with old wounds. But as the weeks passed and our engagement party approached, I couldn't help but hope. Maybe this time would be different. Maybe this milestone would finally be the one they'd show up for. We chose a beautiful restaurant overlooking the bay for our engagement dinner. I sent the invitations 8 weeks in advance, followed by an email, and finally a text reminder the day before. My parents responded to none of them. The night of the party, I kept glancing at the door, even as I greeted our other guests with a smile that didn't quite reach my eyes. Jason's parents had flown in from Chicago. My college roommate came from London. Even my boss made time in his packed schedule. But the 2 seats I'd reserved at the main table remained empty. "They're probably just running late," Jason whispered, squeezing my hand under the table, but we both knew better. As dinner was served, I made the call I'd been dreading. It went straight to voicemail, both their phones. The next morning, I got a text from my mother. "So sorry we missed dinner. Your father wasn't feeling well and we forgot to charge our phones. Can we reschedule?" I stared at the message for a long time, noting the lack of specific details about my dinner. They didn't even remember or care that it was my engagement party. Jason found me on the balcony, tears streaming down my face. "They couldn't even be bothered to come up with a good lie," I whispered. He held me tightly as I finally accepted the truth I'd been running from all my life. I would never be a priority to my parents. No achievement, no milestone would ever be enough. "I can't do this anymore," I said finally. "I can't keep hoping they'll change." "Then don't," Jason said simply. "We'll build our own family, one that values presence and love above everything else." That day I made a decision. I wouldn't cut my parents off. That wasn't who I was. But I would stop seeking their approval, stop making space at my table for people who couldn't be bothered to show up. Work became my focus again. With Jason's support, I took on more responsibilities at the company, eventually being promoted to Chief Marketing Officer. When our CEO decided to step down a year later, I was unanimously chosen by the board to take his place. The promotion came with new challenges, including managing the company's growing public profile. We were expanding rapidly, acquiring smaller competitors and launching innovative products. Financial magazines started taking notice. Investors were calling. We were no longer the scrappy startup. We were becoming a major player. "You need something that represents your new position," Jason said one evening as we walked along the marina. He pointed to the yachts bobbing in their berths, gleaming under the setting sun. "What about one of those?" I laughed. "A yacht? Isn't that a bit cliché for a CEO?" "Maybe," he grinned, "but it would be perfect for client meetings. And," he added softly, "it would be nice to have a place that's just ours, away from everything." The idea took root. After weeks of research and viewings, we found her, a sleek 120-foot vessel with clean lines and timeless elegance. I named her Vindication, a private acknowledgement of how far I'd come. The yacht became our weekend sanctuary and an impressive venue for business gatherings. Jason and I would often spend Sundays sailing along the coast, the worries of the week fading with each nautical mile. I never posted about the yacht on social media. It wasn't about showing off. It was about creating a space where I felt completely at peace. But fate had other plans for my private sanctuary. That summer, our company announced a major partnership with a global tech giant. The deal made headlines in business publications, and somehow a photographer captured a shot of me arriving at the press conference, disembarking from Vindication at the marina. The image was striking, me in a sharp suit against the backdrop of the gleaming yacht, the company's logo visible on my briefcase. The photo accompanied articles about the partnership in several financial magazines and business sections of major newspapers. I didn't think much of it until my phone rang one evening. It was my Aunt Sandra, my mother's sister, and the only family member who had ever truly seen me. "You might want to sit down for this," she said, her voice tight with barely contained anger. "What happened?" I asked, immediately concerned. Aunt Sandra was normally so composed. "I'm at your parents' house for their anniversary dinner," she explained. "Everyone's here, extended family, neighbors, your father's colleagues." My stomach knotted. I hadn't been invited, of course. "Someone brought up the article about your company's new partnership," she continued. "They had the magazine with them, the one with you and your yacht on the cover." I closed my eyes, already knowing where this was headed. Your mother snatched it up and started showing it to everyone. That's our daughter, she kept saying. She's always been so ambitious. Your father was beaming, telling everyone how he always knew you'd make it big. My hand tightened around the phone. They didn't even come to my engagement party, I whispered. I know, sweetheart. That's why I'm calling. The whole room went silent when I asked them about that. They tried to change the subject, but I wouldn't let them. I asked if they'd even met Jason yet. They hadn't. Despite being engaged for over a year, my parents had never once suggested meeting the man I loved. Every invitation we extended was met with an excuse. I couldn't sit there and listen to them take credit for your success, Aunt Sandra continued, not when they've missed every important moment of your adult life. So I left. I'm calling from my car. I sat in stunned silence, a strange mix of emotions washing over me, anger, vindication, and an odd sense of clarity. Thank you for telling me, I finally managed. You deserve to know, she said softly. And for what it's worth, I'm incredibly proud of you, not because of the yacht or the CEO title, but because of who you are despite how they treated you. After we hung up, I found Jason in his home office. I told him everything, the words spilling out in a rush. They're finally proud of me, I said, my voice breaking. Not because I'm kind or hardworking or even engaged to be married, but because I have things they can brag about to their friends. Jason pulled me close. What do you want to do? I thought about it for a long moment. I want to stop waiting for them to love me the way I needed to be loved, I said finally. I want to acknowledge that they'll never be the parents I deserved, and that's okay because I've built a life full of people who do see me. The next morning, I sent my parents a text. Aunt Sandra told me about the dinner. I'm glad you're proud of the yacht and the CEO title. I'm proud of those things too, but I'm more proud of the life and relationship I've built with Jason, the fiancé you've never met despite having had a year to do so. I'm getting married in 3 months. You're welcome to attend, but I won't be saving seats anymore or checking the door to see if you've arrived. That chapter of my life is closed. My finger hovered over the send button for several heartbeats before I pressed it. There was no turning back now. Their response came 2 hours later. We're sorry you feel that way. We've always supported you. Things have just been busy. Of course we want to meet Jason and be at your wedding. No acknowledgement of their absence at the engagement party. No recognition of the pattern that had defined our relationship for decades. Just the same hollow excuses. I showed Jason the message. What do you think? I asked. He read it carefully before answering. I think they believe it, he said finally. I think they've convinced themselves that they've been supportive parents who were just busy with important things. And I think you need to decide if you want to keep trying to change that narrative or accept that this is who they are. I'm done trying, I said with unexpected conviction, but I'm not done with them completely. I'm just done expecting them to be different. We sent them a formal wedding invitation with all the details. No special calls, no reminders, no reserved front row seats. They would be treated like any other guest, because that's what they had chosen to be in my life. The weeks before the wedding were a whirlwind of final preparations. We'd chosen a breathtaking venue on the coast, with the ceremony set to take place on a cliff overlooking the ocean at sunset. Everything was coming together perfectly. Then, 3 days before the wedding, my mother called. "Darling, we have a slight problem," she began, her voice dripping with practiced concern. "Your father has a very important conference the weekend of your wedding. We tried to rearrange things, but it's just impossible. You understand, don't you? We're so disappointed." I closed my eyes, a strange calm settling over me. This was exactly what I had expected, yet the predictability of their behavior still managed to sting. "What conference?" I asked, keeping my voice neutral. "Oh, it's a medical conference in Boston. Very prestigious. Your father was specifically invited to speak. My father, a mid-level manager at a pharmaceutical company, was not a doctor and rarely spoke at conferences. But I didn't point this out. I see, I said simply. Well, that's unfortunate. We're just sick about it, she continued, clearly relieved that I wasn't making a scene. But we'll make it up to you. Perhaps we could host a small reception when you get back from your honeymoon. Nothing fancy, just family. That won't be necessary, I said. Jason and I will be quite busy after the honeymoon. The company is expanding, and we're looking at properties in Europe. Europe? She exclaimed, suddenly interested. You're moving to Europe? Possibly opening an office there, I clarified. Nothing's decided yet. Well, you must keep us informed. Your father has always wanted to visit Europe. Perhaps we could come see your new place once you're settled. Of course. Now that there was something in it for them, a free place to stay in Europe, they were interested. We'll see, I said vaguely. I should go. There's still a lot to finalize before the ceremony. Of course, darling. We're so proud of you, and we're just devastated about missing the wedding. Goodbye, Mom, I said, ending the call before she could hear the tremor in my voice. Jason found me on the balcony a few minutes later, staring out at the horizon. They're not coming, I told him, unsurprised yet still somehow disappointed. He wrapped his arms around me from behind, resting his chin on my shoulder. Their loss, he said simply. And he was right. It was their loss. They would miss seeing me, radiant and confident, promising forever to a man who loved me completely. They would miss the joy on my face as I danced with friends who had become family. They would miss the moment when I looked out at the gathering and realized I had everything I needed right there. The wedding was perfect. Aunt Sandra walked me down the aisle, her eyes shining with pride and love. Jason's parents embraced me as a daughter, not just an in-law. My friends surrounded us with genuine celebration. As I looked out at the faces of the people who had chosen to be there, people who had shown up not just for the big moments, but for the ordinary ones too, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. This was what family was supposed to be. These were the people who deserved my energy, my time, my open heart. After the ceremony, as the reception was in full swing, Aunt Sandra pulled me aside. "Have you checked your phone?" she asked. I shook my head. "I left it in the bridal suite." "Why?" "Your mother's been calling me non-stop. Apparently someone posted photos of your wedding online, and now they're scrambling to find a flight. Your father's conference miraculously resolved itself." I laughed, though there was little humor in it. "Let me guess, they saw the venue. Or maybe they heard that the CEO of Jason's company is here." Aunt Sandra squeezed my hand. "Does it matter? The pattern is the same." "No," I agreed. "It doesn't matter anymore." And I returned to the reception, to my husband and our chosen family. We danced until our feet hurt, laughed until our sides ached, and loved fiercely in the moment. 3 days later, as Jason and I were preparing to leave for our honeymoon, I received a text from my mother. "We are so sorry we missed your special day. The photos online look lovely. Perhaps we could meet for lunch when you return. We'd love to finally meet Jason." I showed the message to my husband, who raised an eyebrow. "What do you want to do?" I thought for a moment. "I'm going to respond, but I'm not going to chase them anymore. If they want to be part of our lives, they'll need to make a real effort." I typed a simple reply. "We'll be away for 3 weeks. I'll reach out when we're back and settled." Then I put my phone away and turned my attention to the journey ahead, both the honeymoon and the life Jason and I would build together. A life where people showed up. A life where love wasn't conditional on achievements or possessions. A life where I was valued simply for being myself. As our private car pulled away from our home, heading toward the airport, I looked back once at the life I was leaving behind. The endless quest for parental approval, The hurt of constant disappointment, the pattern of being remembered only when it was convenient. "Ready?" Jason asked, taking my hand. I smiled, facing forward again. More than ready. Our honeymoon was 3 weeks of pure bliss. Island hopping through Greece, disconnected from emails, news, and family drama. On the white sand beaches of Mykonos and the cliffside villages of Santorini, I felt myself truly exhale for perhaps the first time in my adult life. Jason and I talked for hours about our future, the family we hoped to build, the values we wanted to prioritize, the life we envisioned together. "I want our children to never doubt they're loved," I told him one evening as we watched the sunset from our private terrace. "I want them to know that being themselves is enough, that they don't need yachts or CEO titles to matter." Jason squeezed my hand. "Our kids will know what unconditional love feels like," he promised. "They'll see it every day in how we treat each other and them." When we finally returned home, tanned and rested, reality was waiting in my inbox. Among the hundreds of work emails was a message from my mother, sent just 2 days after we left for our honeymoon. "We haven't heard from you about lunch. We're free next Saturday. Let us know." No questions about our trip. No well wishes for our marriage. Just an expectation that I would rearrange my schedule to suit theirs as always. I showed Jason the email, and he sighed. "Some things never change." "No," I agreed, "they don't. But I have." I waited until we'd been back for a full week, settling into our routine as a married couple and catching up at work, before I responded to my mother. "Just getting settled after the honeymoon. We could do brunch on Sunday at Harborview Restaurant at 11. Let me know if that works." Short, polite, and setting clear boundaries about when I was available. No apologies for the delay, no excessive details, just an offer that worked for us. Her response came within minutes. "Sunday is difficult. Your father has golf in the morning. Could we do Saturday instead? Or perhaps dinner on Friday?" I showed Jason the message. "What do you think? Should we accommodate them?" He considered this thoughtfully. "What would you have done before?" "Changed my plans without hesitation," I admitted. "Rescheduled meetings, cancelled appointments, whatever it took to make it work for them, even knowing they wouldn't do the same for me." And now, I thought about the promise I'd made to myself on our wedding day. Now I hold my boundaries. Sunday works for us. If it doesn't work for them, we can try again another time. I sent a simple response. "Unfortunately, Saturday and Friday don't work for our schedule. Our offer for Sunday brunch stands. Let us know." 3 days passed with no response. I refused to chase them, refused to send follow-up texts asking if they'd received my message. On Thursday evening, as Jason and I were cooking dinner together, my phone rang. My father's name flashed on the screen. I answered, putting the call on speaker so Jason could hear. "Hello? Your mother tells me you're being difficult about scheduling lunch," he said without preamble, his voice carrying that familiar note of disapproval. "You know, I have standing tea times on Sunday mornings." I took a deep breath, catching Jason's encouraging nod. "I understand you have golf on Sundays, Dad. Jason and I have commitments on Friday and Saturday. I'm offering what works for our schedule, just as you're communicating what works for yours. Can't you move things around? This is important. We haven't even met your husband yet." "And whose fault is that?" I asked, surprising myself with my directness. "You've had over a year to meet him. You missed our engagement party. You missed our wedding. Now you're asking us to rearrange our lives because you've suddenly decided meeting him is a priority." Silence stretched across the line. I could almost see my father's face reddening, unused to being challenged. "We explained about the wedding," he said stiffly. "The conference was an excuse," I finished for him. "We both know that, Dad, just like we both know you could have met Jason dozens of times before now if you'd actually wanted to." More silence, then a heavy sigh. "Fine. We'll skip the back 9 on Sunday, 11 at Harborview. Thank you, I said, keeping my voice level. We'll see you then. After he hung up, Jason pulled me into a hug. I'm proud of you, he whispered against my hair. Sunday arrived sunny and mild, perfect brunch weather. Jason and I arrived at Harborview 15 minutes early, securing a table on the patio overlooking the water. I wore a simple sundress, my hair loose around my shoulders. No power suit, no CEO persona. Just me. At 11:05, I spotted them walking toward our table. My mother wore what I recognized as her important occasion outfit. The designer dress and pearls she reserved for country club events and dinner parties with my father's boss. My father was in his usual golf attire, clearly planning to head straight to the course after brunch. They didn't recognize me at first, scanning the patio with slight frowns. I raised my hand in a small wave, and their eyes finally landed on us. Something like disappointment flashed across my mother's face. Had she expected the yacht-owning CEO from the magazine cover, not the relaxed woman in a casual sundress? There you are, my mother said as they approached, air kissing near my cheek. We were looking for a table inside. It's quite warm out here. We requested the patio, I explained. The view is lovely. My father extended his hand to Jason. So you're the man who married our daughter? Tim Reynolds. Jason Chen, my husband replied, with a warm smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. It's nice to finally meet you both. We settled into an awkward silence as we studied our menus. After we ordered, my mother launched into what sounded like a rehearsed speech. We want to apologize for missing your wedding, she began, folding her hands on the table. It was unfortunate timing with your father's conference, but we were there in spirit. I nodded, not agreeing but not challenging her either. I appreciate that. The venue looked spectacular in the photos, she continued. Was that your company's property? The coastal estate? And there it was, the real interest. Not in our vows or our happiness, but in the trappings of wealth they could associate themselves with. No, Jason answered smoothly. It belongs to a friend who generously offered it for our special day. My father perked up. A friend? Anyone we might know? Just someone we've known for years, I said vaguely, unwilling to name drop for their benefit. Our food arrived, providing a welcome distraction. As we ate, my parents peppered Jason with questions about his background, his job, his family. They seemed pleased to learn his father was a successful surgeon and his mother a former concert pianist. Connections worth having, in their estimation. And you work in finance? My father asked between bites of his eggs Benedict. Investment banking, Jason confirmed, though I'm transitioning to venture capital now. My mother's eyes lit up. How fascinating. Perhaps you could give us some investment advice. We've been thinking about diversifying our portfolio. Jason glanced at me, a silent question in his eyes. I gave him a slight nod, curious to see how this would play out. I'd be happy to recommend some resources, he said diplomatically. Though I don't typically advise family members, tends to complicate relationships. My father waved this off. Nonsense. Family helps family. Speaking of which, he turned to me, your mother and I have been discussing our retirement plans. We're thinking of downsizing the house in the next few years. I took a sip of my mimosa, waiting for the real point. We've had our eye on a lovely community in Boca Raton, my mother continued. Many of our friends have already made the move. The properties there are quite substantial in price. Ah, there it was, not even subtle. Florida has become very popular for retirees, I commented neutrally. I'm sure you'll find something suitable when you're ready. A flicker of annoyance crossed my father's face at my deliberate obtuseness. What your mother is saying is that we could use some help with the down payment. Nothing major, perhaps a loan of about $500,000. With your new position and that yacht of yours, we figured it wouldn't be much of a strain. Jason choked slightly on his coffee. I placed my hand over his on the table, squeezing gently. That's quite a request to make at our first meeting in over a year, I observed, keeping my voice calm, especially given that you missed our wedding and have shown little interest in our lives until you saw the yacht in a magazine. My mother's practiced smile faltered. That's not fair, dear. We've always supported you. Have you? I asked, meeting her gaze directly. In what way, exactly? The question hung in the air between us. For once, my mother seemed at a loss for words. We raised you, my father interjected, his tone sharp. Put a roof over your head, food on the table. The bare minimum required by law, I noted. And since I turned 18, can you name one important event in my adult life that you've attended? One accomplishment you've celebrated without it benefiting you in some way? They exchanged glances, clearly not expecting this conversation. We've been busy, my mother said weakly. Your father's career... I've been busy too, I interrupted gently. Building a life, running a company, getting married, all without your presence or support. And now you want me to give you $500,000 for a retirement home in Florida? My father's expression hardened. So that's it? You become successful and now you're too good for your family? Going to hold old grudges? Jason tensed beside me, but I squeezed his hand again, silently telling him I had this. This isn't about grudges, Dad. It's about patterns and boundaries. The pattern is that you only show interest in my life when there's something in it for you. The boundary is that I'm no longer willing to fund a relationship that only exists when it's convenient or beneficial for you. We're your parents, my mother hissed, looking around to make sure nobody was listening to our conversation. You owe us. I owed you respect and gratitude for good parenting, I corrected her, which I gave for many years despite evidence to the contrary. But I don't owe you money for a luxury retirement home when you couldn't be bothered to attend my wedding. My father pushed his plate away, his face flushed with anger. I see how it is. You've let money change you. I couldn't help but laugh at the irony. Money didn't change me, Dad. It changed how you see me. Suddenly I'm worth your time because I have something you want. This is ridiculous, he muttered. We came here to connect with you and meet your husband, not to be lectured about our parenting. Did you? I asked quietly. Because from where I'm sitting, you came here to secure a loan for a property in Florida and maybe get an introduction to Jason's father, the surgeon. My mother's eyes widened slightly. Bullseye. I think we're done here, my father announced, throwing his napkin on the table and standing abruptly. When you're ready to show some respect and gratitude to the people who raised you, you know where to find us. My mother hesitated before following his lead, uncertainty flickering across her face. For a brief moment, I thought she might stay, might actually try to repair our relationship, but then her expression hardened and she rose from her chair. This isn't how I raised you to behave, she said, her voice tight with disapproval. No, I agreed softly. You raised me to accommodate everyone else's needs at the expense of my own. I had to learn this part by myself. They left without another word, my father's back rigid with indignation, my mother scurrying to keep pace with him. I watched them go, waiting for the familiar wave of guilt and grief to crash over me. It didn't come. Instead, I felt an unexpected lightness, as if the last chains of obligation and false hope had finally fallen away. Are you okay? Jason asked, his eyes filled with concern. I considered the question carefully. Yes, I said, realizing it was true. I think I finally am. He smiled, raising his mimosa glass. To boundaries. I clinked my glass against his. To knowing your worth. The weeks following our brunch confrontation passed in peaceful silence. No texts from my mother asking when I'd come to my senses. No calls from my father demanding an apology. Just quiet. Not the painful absence I'd felt for years, but a tranquil space filled with the life Jason and I were building together. At work, I focused on our European expansion, traveling to potential office locations in London, Berlin, and Barcelona. At home, Jason and I began tentative conversations about starting a family. We renovated the guest bedroom into a home office that could eventually become a nursery. We researched school districts and pediatricians. We dreamed. 4 months after the brunch incident, I received an unexpected call from Aunt Sandra. "Your father's in the hospital," she said without preamble. "Nothing life-threatening, gallbladder surgery. But your mother's falling apart over it. You might want to check in." I thanked her for letting me know, then sat at my desk for a long time, considering my options. The old me would have dropped everything immediately, cancelled meetings, and rushed to the hospital to provide emotional support for a mother who had rarely supported me. The new me recognized that, while compassion was important, maintaining boundaries was essential for my well-being. I decided on a middle path. I sent flowers to my father's hospital room with a simple note wishing him a speedy recovery. I called my mother and offered to have meals delivered to their house during his recovery, which she accepted with surprised gratitude. "Would you like me to come visit?" I asked, careful to keep my tone neutral, neither hoping for rejection nor fearing it. "That would be nice," she said, sounding uncertain. "Your father might appreciate it." 2 days later, I walked into my father's hospital room alone. Jason had offered to come, but I felt this was something I needed to do by myself. My father looked smaller somehow against the white sheets, his complexion pale, his usual commanding presence diminished by the hospital gown and IV lines. "Hi, Dad," I said from the doorway. "How are you feeling?" He looked up, surprise crossing his face before he schooled his features into something more neutral. "Been better," he admitted. "Thanks for the flowers." I nodded, moving further into the room. My mother had stepped out to speak with the doctor, leaving us alone for the first time in years. An awkward silence stretched between us. I noticed the magazine on his bedside table, another business publication with my company featured in it. The irony wasn't lost on me. "The doctor says it was a straightforward procedure," my father finally said. "I should be home tomorrow." "That's good news." I settled into the visitor's chair. "I've arranged for meals to be delivered for the next 2 weeks. Just basics, nothing fancy, but it should help Mum while you're recovering." He nodded, looking uncomfortable, not from pain, I suspected, but from finding himself in a position where he needed help, especially from me. "That's thoughtful," he said, the words seeming to cost him something. Another silence fell. I didn't rush to fill it. "Your mother tells me you're opening offices in Europe," he ventured finally. "Yes, London first, then Berlin next year if all goes well." "Impressive," he acknowledged. "The company's grown a lot under your leadership." "It has," I agreed simply, not elaborating, not seeking his approval or validation. He shifted in the bed, wincing slightly. "Look, about that brunch. Things got heated. We may have overstepped." It wasn't quite an apology, but from my father, it was unprecedented. I nodded, accepting the olive branch for what it was. "We've all made mistakes," I said carefully. "The important thing is what we learn from them." Before he could respond, my mother returned, surprise flickering across her face when she saw me sitting with my father, the atmosphere between us calm, if not warm. "Oh, you came," she said, stating the obvious. "I was just speaking with Dr. Winters. Everything looks good for discharge tomorrow." "That's great news," I said, standing. "I should get going. I have a conference call in an hour, but I wanted to stop by and see how you were doing." "So soon?" My mother's disappointment seemed genuine. "We've hardly had a chance to talk." "I have commitments, Mom, but I'll check in tomorrow after Dad gets home." My father caught my eye, something like understanding passing between us. "Go do what you need to do," he said. We appreciate you coming by." It was a small moment but significant. My father acknowledging that I had responsibilities beyond family obligations, responsibilities that mattered. Over the next few weeks, a fragile new dynamic emerged. My parents didn't ask for money again. They didn't make unreasonable demands on my time. When they invited Jason and me for dinner, they actually engaged with him, asking about his interests and career with what seemed like genuine curiosity. It wasn't perfect. Old habits occasionally surfaced. My mother still compared me unfavorably to Mark. My father still dismissed my business achievements as lucky breaks. But there was effort, however imperfect, and I recognized it for the progress it was. 6 months after our wedding, Jason and I discovered we were expecting our first child. We kept the news private for the first trimester, treasuring the secret between just the two of us. When we finally began sharing our joy, Aunt Sandra was the first family member I called. "A baby!" she exclaimed, her delight evident even through the phone. "Oh, honey, I'm so happy for you both." "We're excited," I admitted. "Nervous but excited." "You're going to be an amazing mother," she said with such conviction that tears sprang to my eyes. "You know why? Because you know exactly what a child needs, to be seen, valued, and loved unconditionally." After we hung up, I sat with my hand on my still flat stomach, thinking about the little life growing inside me. Aunt Sandra was right. I did know what a child needed, because I had spent my entire life needing it myself. The decision to tell my parents was complicated. Part of me feared they would either be disinterested or would suddenly become over-involved for all the wrong reasons. Another part recognized that this baby represented a new generation, a chance to break cycles and establish healthier patterns. In the end, I invited them to dinner at our home, neutral territory, where Jason and I felt comfortable and in control. I prepared a simple meal, nothing extravagant. This wasn't about impressing them, it was about sharing news. They arrived promptly, bearing a bottle of wine and awkward smiles. My mother's eyes darted around our home, taking in the tasteful decor and ocean view. "Your place is lovely," she said, and I detected genuine admiration rather than the critical assessment I was accustomed to. So bright and open. We made small talk through appetizers, discussing safe topics, the weather, a recent movie release, my father's recovered health. As I served the main course, Jason caught my eye and nodded encouragingly. "We have some news to share," I began, setting down my water glass. "Jason and I are expecting a baby. I'm due in early March." My mother's hand flew to her mouth. "A baby? Oh my goodness." My father blinked rapidly, seeming genuinely surprised. "Well, that's wonderful news. Congratulations to you both." "Thank you," Jason said, reaching over to squeeze my hand on the table. "We're very excited." "How are you feeling?" my mother asked, leaning forward with unexpected interest. "Any morning sickness? Cravings?" The conversation flowed more naturally after that, with my mother sharing stories from her own pregnancies and my father awkwardly offering financial advice about college funds. There was a surreal quality to their sudden engagement, their apparent enthusiasm for this new chapter in my life. As they were preparing to leave, my mother hesitated by the door. That is, would it be all right if I called you sometimes, just to check in about the pregnancy? I'd like to be involved if you're comfortable with that." I studied her face, searching for hidden agendas or ulterior motives. What I saw instead surprised me. Vulnerability and something that looked like hope. "That would be fine," I said carefully. "I have a doctor's appointment next week. I could call you after." Her face brightened. "I'd like that very much." After they left, Jason wrapped his arms around me from behind, his hands resting gently on my stomach. "That went better than expected," he observed. "It did," I agreed, still processing. I'm not sure what to make of it. Maybe becoming grandparents is making them reevaluate things, he suggested. Or maybe your boundaries are finally getting through to them. Maybe, I said, not fully convinced but willing to remain open to the possibility of change, real change, not just temporary adjustments. In the months that followed, a tentative new relationship began to form. My mother called regularly, asking about my pregnancy with what seemed like genuine interest. My father sent articles about child-proofing and education funds without commentary or demands. When we learned we were having a daughter, they sent a beautiful handmade cradle, not extravagant, but thoughtful and personal. As my due date approached, Aunt Sandra hosted a baby shower at her home. To my surprise, my mother not only attended, but actively participated, sharing stories and advice without making the event about herself. She stayed afterward to help clean up, and as we worked side by side in the kitchen, she suddenly stopped, her hands stilling in the soapy water. "I wasn't a good mother to you," she said quietly, staring down at the sink. "I know that now." I froze, a dish towel clutched in my hands, unprepared for this moment of reckoning. "Your father and we got caught up in appearances, in status. Mark was easier because he wanted the same things we did. You were always different, stronger, more independent. We didn't know how to connect with you, so we stopped trying." Tears pricked at my eyes, but I remained silent, letting her continue. "When I saw that photo of you with the yacht, I was proud, but not because of what you had achieved. I was proud because it made us look good. That's when I realized how twisted our priorities had become." She looked up finally, her eyes wet. "I don't want to make the same mistakes with my granddaughter. I want to do better. I want to see her, and you, for who you are, not what you can give us or how you make us look." It was the most honest conversation we'd ever had. Not a perfect apology, not a complete acknowledgement of all the hurt they'd caused, but a beginning, a crack in the facade that had defined our relationship for decades. "I'd like that too," I said softly, "but it will take time, Mom. Trust has to be rebuilt." She nodded, understanding in her eyes. "I know. We're willing to do the work if you'll give us the chance." 2 weeks later, on a clear March morning, my water broke. Jason drove me to the hospital, calm and steady as always. 12 hours of labor later, our daughter entered the world with a powerful cry that made both of us laugh through our tears. Holding her in my arms, looking down at her perfect face, I made a silent promise. "You will always know how loved you are. You will never question your place or your worth. You will be seen." We named her Sophia, meaning wisdom, the wisdom to learn from the past without being defined by it. My parents visited the hospital the next day, tentative and almost shy as they entered the room. My mother's hands trembled as I placed Sophia in her arms. "She's beautiful," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "She looks just like you did." My father stood awkwardly by the bed, emotion evident in his usual stoic expression. "May I?" he asked, gesturing toward the baby. I nodded, watching as my mother carefully transferred my daughter to his arms. His large hands, normally so sure and commanding, held her with extraordinary gentleness. "Hello, little one," he said softly. "I'm your grandfather." As I watched them with Sophia, I realized something important. The boundaries I had established weren't walls to keep them out permanently. They were guidelines for how to come back in, with respect, with genuine care, with love that didn't come with conditions or expectations. Would they maintain this new approach? Only time would tell. People don't change overnight, and decades of patterns don't disappear with a single moment of clarity. But for the first time, I saw the possibility of a relationship based on mutual respect rather than obligation and performance. 6 months later, We christened Vindication, not with champagne against her bow, but with a family gathering on her deck. Aunt Sandra was there with her partner. Jason's parents flew in for the occasion. My parents came too, bringing a modest but thoughtful gift for Sophia. As we all stood on the yacht that had inadvertently changed the course of my family's dynamic, I looked around at the faces of the people who had chosen to be present in my life. Some from the beginning, others finding their way back through hard work and honest reflection. The yacht that had once symbolized my success in my parents' eyes now represented something different to me. Not validation or vindication, but a journey. A journey from seeking external approval to finding internal peace. From chasing acknowledgement to embracing my own worth. My father approached me as sunset painted the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks. "You've built quite a life," he said, his gaze taking in the yacht, my husband, my daughter, my chosen family. "I have," I agreed. "It's not about the yacht or the company, though." He nodded slowly. "I'm beginning to understand that," he admitted. Too late in many ways, but perhaps not too late for her." He nodded towards Sophia, sleeping peacefully in Jason's arms. "It's never too late to change the story," I told him, meaning it, "as long as the change is real." Later that night, after our guests had left and Sophia was tucked into her crib, Jason and I stood on the deck under a blanket of stars. He wrapped his arms around me, and we swayed slightly to the gentle rocking of the yacht on the water. "Happy?" he asked simply. I thought about the journey, the pain of invisibility, the struggle to be seen, the courage to establish boundaries, the wisdom to allow second chances when earned. "Complete," I answered, leaning back against his chest. "I'm complete." And I was. Not because my parents had finally seen my worth, but because I had seen it myself. Long before the yacht, long before the CEO title, long before any external validation. I had built a life filled with people who valued presence over presence, connection over convenience, love over status. As Vindication floated peacefully in her berth, I made one final promise to myself and to my daughter. We would navigate life's waters together, anchored not by possessions or achievements, but by the unshakable knowledge of our inherent worth. A worth that existed long before anyone else recognized it, and would remain long after the yachts and titles faded into memory.